All right, good afternoon, all. We are about to begin our Cooking Matters session. There are three sessions in this series. And so hopefully you'll be able to attend all three. Our first presenter is named Taylor. Taylor coordinates the Cooking Matters program in El Paso County, teaching nutrition and cooking classes throughout the community. She has a bachelor's degree in nutrition and health promotion from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. Prior to working at Care and Share, she completed a service term with the AmeriCorps in Washington State, coordinating 5 separate nutrition programs. And we also have Jessica. If you attended the Cooking Matters sessions last year, you've met her before. Jessie Henderson Delgado has worked in education for over 25 years as a teacher, tutor, program developer, and playologist. Jessie obtained her degree in nutrition from Arizona State University, where she worked in research for the College of Health Solutions, studying ways to increase children's fresh fruit and vegetable consumption while at school. Jessie is a proud mother of 5 and a big fan of the outdoors, music, and swimming. She loves Colorado rivers and lakes and enjoys spending her free time in the mountains. She is grateful to be with Cooking Matters as she loves to share tips for healthy eating and wants to help families bring more delicious and nutritious foods to the dinner table. And so a few quick reminders before we begin. Please keep your camera on if you're able to, and please mute yourself as a courtesy to the presenters. We will be taking attendance at the end of the session as opposed to the beginning. And so without further ado, Taylor and Jessica.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoints here. All right. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight's session is called the Family Kitchen. So we are going to be talking about different ways to involve kids in the kitchen, mostly through cooking, but through other methods as well, and why that might be important. We're also going to talk a little bit about modeling behaviors, just to set up our kids for healthy lifelong habits. We're going to talk about some different age-appropriate tasks for kids in the kitchen. So regardless of whether your kiddo is 2 or 12, different ways to involve them. We're also going to be doing a cooking demo. So I'm going to do one of our Cooking Matters recipes and just point out some of the steps that your kids can be involved in if you wanted to make the same one at home. And then finally, we're going to talk about grocery shopping. So we're going to share some ideas for how we can keep the kids busy when we're at the grocery store, since that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. And then also share some ideas for how we can save money at the grocery store and also choose the healthiest options available. So I was going to do introductions with everybody, but since we're a pretty large group, I think this would probably take a lot more of our time than we want to do. But if you do want to share in the chat how old your kids are at home, and if they ever help you in the kitchen, that'd be great. Also, if there's anything in particular that you're hoping to learn or anything that you have specific questions about, definitely feel free to drop that in the chat as well. Also, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, and so I'd really appreciate input if you have any. So definitely feel free to give it, whether it's in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself and share, feel free to. And then again, any questions that come up, you can feel free to put those in the chat as well. Jessie is monitoring the chat, so hopefully we won't miss anything there. But knowing the different ages of kids is pretty helpful to see which groups we have to think about.
It looks like we have mostly bigger kids, so 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and teenagers, a couple tiny little ones. Someone has 9-year-old twins, which I have 9-year-old twins too.
Awesome. Looks like we have quite a variety. Rachel has a 13-year-old helping her right now. That's awesome.
Someone's exciting about the shopping tips.
Awesome.
a young one learning how to do simple meal prep with a disability. Cooking healthy with limited time. Nice.
Awesome. Sounds like quite a few of you already involve your kids in the kitchen, which is awesome. All right. Well, definitely still feel free to keep on chatting in if you haven't already. All right, so like I mentioned, the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is just involving kids in the kitchen. So I think the first big question is here is why would we even want to do that? If anyone has any ideas for why we might want to involve kids in the kitchen. So definitely some good life skills. I think that's really important. And good quality time. It's definitely a good time to bond together, especially, I mean, we all have to make and eat meals. So what better opportunity, kind of multitasking there. Some responsibility, healthy eating habits, extra hands, definitely. A lot of life skills, I definitely agree. I'm gonna be honest and say that I didn't learn how to cook until I was a teenager. So I think the earlier we can start, the better.
If you have no food in the fridge, you have to learn how to get some. I like that too.
Exactly. Awesome. So you guys pretty much covered all of these, but some other ideas. So one big part of it is kind of giving kids some autonomy and some buy-in at meal times, especially for those of you who might have picky eaters at home. Sometimes it can be really challenging to get them to eat the things you make, but kids automatically have more interest in eating things that they helped create. And I think we've experienced that a lot in our in-person classes, is even when we start off at the beginning of class and we're making a recipe with like a lot of vegetables and kids are like, that's kind of gross. I don't think I want to eat that. Just having that opportunity to actually play a part in it, they're always a lot more willing to actually try it. So definitely just creating some more buy-in at mealtime is a big part of it. Also, not only is that important to get our kids to eat, but also just preventing food waste. Because if they're actually eating the things, we don't have to throw it away, since the most expensive food is the food that we do throw away. Like a lot of you mentioned, cooking is a really basic life skill. We have to eat in order to survive. So it's really important for everyone to learn how to do that. And I think doing it as a kids is one of the best times. As they get older, they can probably cook a lot of meals on their own. And that way, if they're going to college or just moving out, they already know how to do those things. You don't have to worry about them. Also, it's a really good time to just practice a bunch of other skills. Cooking involves a lot more than I think we oftentimes realize. We have some motor skills there, reading the recipe. I think sometimes cooking can pretty much be like a science experiment, and that's a good time to teach kids about that. And then also a good time to practice math. So especially if you're in these weird times where we're learning a lot of things online, it's a good time to kind of practice those things in a more hands-on way. And then also having kids in the kitchen really boosts their confidence in a lot of ways. So it's important not just to have that life skill, but also to have that feeling that you have that confidence and that competence moving forward, because that's a really critical time when kids start to form those things. And then it also makes, like some of you mentioned, it's also just a good time for family bonding, for sure. So how do you all feel about having your kids help in the kitchen? It sounded like from our introductions here, several of you already do involve them. So if you have any experiences with that you want to share about, or if there's any challenges that kind of keep you from involving your kids in the kitchen, I'd love to hear about those.
And I was going to say on the last slide too, what are our kids doing at dinner time if they're not helping us with dinner? What are they usually doing? Anybody want to shout it out? Homework. Okay, well, homework's okay, but a lot of kids are watching TV. Okay, so if they're playing and running around doing homework, that's okay. But a lot of kids, it's a good thing to get them off the TV without having to fight for a little bit. You say, come on, help me make dinner. And we have favorite memories as kids in the kitchen with families. Small kitchens can make it stressful. I don't know if they're running around is something they're doing while we're cooking or if something that makes it stressful. Okay, so when you're not in a rush, Andrew and Brianne said when they're not in a rush, it's more enjoyable. Some kids really enjoy it and they're really eager to learn. Sometimes it's a little chaotic.
Definitely. So some common challenges we've heard in the past that I'll share about are that kids are messy, which I think is kind of inevitable. So that's definitely something to consider. But one thing to think about is that it's kind of like you're buying in at this time and you're having to clean up more messes probably, although you can involve the kids in the cleanup too. I think that's also an important part of it, not just the cooking part, but also the cleaning up. But again, just giving them those life skills and that responsibility so that as they get older, then you don't have to worry about that as much anymore. Also, you really kind of have to monitor, especially our younger kids when they're cooking or just helping out, because I mean, if they have knives, that's obviously a little bit dangerous. You want to make sure you're watching them for that. But kids also, sometimes mess up, like if you're having them crack eggs, sometimes you get a lot of extra crunch in there that you may not want. So one idea is just to start with like really simple steps and supervise them for those. And then as they get more comfortable with those things, and again, building that confidence, moving on to bigger things. So for example, I'll share some recipes in a little bit here for some ideas for things that kids can do. But one example is like ripping up salad greens, because it really doesn't matter what they look like. And so that's like a pretty difficult task to mess up. So that's like a good maybe first starting step. Sometimes having your kids in the kitchen can make dinner take a lot longer, especially if you're having to supervise them and you can't just do everything that you want at once. So whoever mentioned that you only do it on nights when things are a little less hectic, I think that's a great time. Involving your kids in the kitchen is really a good thing to do, but it doesn't mean you have to do it every single night. Just when you can, when it makes sense to you, I think that's a good place to start. And then again, as they're gaining that competence, they can be involved more without you having to like watch them the entire time. And then also, especially for younger kids, sometimes they'll get really impatient because they just want dinner to be done. So some ideas for that are having a snack like before dinner, or having them try things as you're going along. So for example, if you're making something with like different vegetables, that's a good time to try foods and a good time to like talk about them. If you're trying them before you make them, when the vegetables are raw, and then trying them afterwards when it's all put together, and talking about like, what are the differences? Did you prefer it this way or that way? Is another good opportunity. Do you have something to add, Jessie?
I started looking at the chat. I did have something to add. Oh yeah. So imagine, okay, so when we aren't feeling very patient and we aren't feeling like we have a lot of time, what's going to happen at that point? Are kids going to have a positive experience in the kitchen? Or are we going to be short with them? Right. So you think about like maybe a Sunday's the right day to start, and then as they get older, the more you do it, the less stressful it'll be, you know what I mean? So when we teach children, we want to think of having a prepared environment where we know that there's not a lot of things that are going to cause a lot of chaos. And so we have everything kind of already set up, and we know which parts we're going to have the kids help with, and we're going to know which parts we're just going to tell the kids, okay, take a break and come back when I call you. Yeah. So always when we're in the mood to do it is the right time, not when we're stressed.
Yeah, it's definitely good to create like a positive learning environment instead of one that's just stressful for everybody.
Oh, and then real fast, I'll address something in the chat. So we were talking about maybe older kids who have some disordered eating that want to learn more. I was saying we can volunteer, but we really ask kids to be 16 to volunteer. But if a 14-year-old wanted to come and you guys want to get more experience cooking, you can come to our in-person classes, but they have to be, if they're under 16, with a parent. But I will get Deborah some more information, let you guys know about that later.
All right, so hopefully everyone has received the handout now. So one of the first handouts in there has just a huge list of different ideas for steps that kids can do in the kitchen. I wanted to highlight some of the ones, especially for the younger kids, because I think that those can oftentimes be harder to think of how you can involve them without it just being like really hectic and messy. So for really young kids, like 2 and under, just having them play with the safe utensils like the measuring cups and the spoons and stuff. Maybe not necessarily the ones you're going to use immediately, but you're still introducing them to the kitchen and having them occupied with something while you're cooking, which can oftentimes be useful. Starting to teach them how to say the names and colors of foods. One thing that we talk a lot about in Cooking Matters is encouraging everyone to eat the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, because every different fruit, every different color of fruits and vegetables has like different nutrients. So that's something we can start to teach kids really young and make it kind of exciting, because colors are really fun when you're younger. And then also having them just taste small amounts of foods, getting them exposed to those new fruits and vegetables or grains or other things you might be using. And then as they get a little bit older, some ideas for those 3 to 5-year-olds or even older. So washing produce, that's a really good one. Tearing or snapping foods, like I mentioned, like snapping green beans or tearing up like kale for a salad, plucking fruits or leaves from stems, mixing. In my experience in our classes, kids love to stir things. It's like super fun to them for some reason. So definitely a good thing to do, and also pretty hard to mess up. Measuring ingredients, especially as they start to get older and learn some math and fractions. That's a really good time to practice. They can cut things with plastic or butter knives, or we also have there's kid knives they can use. Those might be a little bit older because they're still a little pointy, but good things to use. Having them shake ingredients. So if you were making like a marinade for chicken or something, you could put that in like a mason jar and have them shake it, or do like the classic like shake and bake if you're like coating something in like a Ziploc bag. That can be pretty fun for kids. Grating cheese can be a good thing. Grading fruits and veggies, you may want to hold off a little bit older or just like supervise them really closely, because we teach a lot of classes with kids in the kitchen and they never seem to cut themselves, but I have had kids accidentally grate their fingers. So that one's a little bit dangerous, but fine to do with some supervision and something they really enjoy. And then also cracking eggs. But again, you might want to wait a little bit before that.
And if you guys have more, you can put them in the chat too. One for this age I like to do is say, go get the milk, go get the butter. Because then you don't have to like, if your hands are dirty and you're cooking, you don't have to like go get the refrigerator all dirty again. Like, let the kids do it. And that's good for one that doesn't have very long focus. All they have to do is run to the fridge.
And something you can also do before you even start cooking if you wanted. That's something we do in our classes just because it's kind of necessary for us, but it's also a good practice to do at home too. We call it mise en place, which I think is French for everything in its place. So that means before we even start cooking, we read our recipe and figure out every single ingredient and utensil that we need and make sure that we have it out and ready to go. So that's something the kids can help with, is gathering all of those things before you start cooking. It can kind of be like a scavenger hunt, like go find this random thing and have them kind of go through the list. If they can read, make sure you have everything. And then as they do get older and can read, having them read the different steps can be a good thing to do. And then they can also start cutting things too, which for our cooking demo, I'm not using a lot of produce items, but I will run through the basic knife safety that we teach a lot, that you can start to teach your kids as you start feeling more comfortable with them cutting things in the kitchen.
In the chat, we have peel shrimp and pick fruit or vegetables out at the grocery store. And Eliza also said Pampered Chef has small kid-sized kitchen items too.
Awesome. You can also have them pick things at home too. So if you're making like pot roast or something for dinner, and then having them choose between like 2 different vegetables, like which one do you want to have on the side? That way, again, there's still a little bit of autonomy. There's not a whole bunch of choice. So they're not choosing like cereal or something on the side, but having some input for what's for dinner. All right, so we are going to do a quick breakout session here. So we're going to put a couple different recipes in the chat and we'll assign them to the different breakout groups. But in your breakout session, if you want to work with your group and decide which steps the kids can help with. And we're going to do 6 breakout groups, but we're going to have 3 recipes. So the challenge here is to figure out as many steps that the kids can help with as possible. All right, so if we just want to have, if someone from each group feels comfortable, just sharing which steps you thought of. We just have like 1 spokesperson for every group. Starting with group 1.
Okay, I forgot what group I was in. Was it 1 or 3?
Either way, that's okay, because it's the same recipe.
Okay, so we had the Cobb salad, and it was like our ideas for kids helping was like shaking up the dressing, tearing apart the lettuce. One of the girls had a great idea, was like letting the kids pick out what they wanted on their salads. So we suggested like getting like little bowls or little Tupperwares and putting the toppings in each one, and kind of letting the kids put on their salad what they wanted, and felt like that would encourage them more to try new things or try the vegetables when they took part in like cutting it up, or not so much cutting it, but like tearing it up, like the chicken, tearing it up, or pulling it apart with a fork. Same thing with the eggs. They'd be more encouraged to try the things when it's individualized, not just like thrown on a plate and say, here you go, you're going to eat that.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really great idea. For really any family meal in general, especially if you have like multiple kids at home, having like different toppings and letting kids choose what they want to put on their salad or taco or pizza or whatever is a really good strategy. So definitely.
That is a good idea, except when the kids become so picky that they're like, I want mayonnaise on this side of the burger, but I want ketchup on that side of the burger. I'm like, okay, you've had too many choices in life.
That's fair. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Does the other Cobb salad group have any other steps you thought of?
Nope, she did a great job covering them.
All right, sounds good. So then our second recipe, I think, was the egg rolls. So does someone from those groups?
So we said that the kids could be able to pick out like the vegetables and the ingredients, whether you're at the store or they're at home, that they could even measure out all of the ingredients ahead of time, that the older kids could grate the vegetables or the ginger and the carrots, prep all the vegetables. We also said that older kids could probably saute the vegetables as well. And we figured all the kids could at least, taste test to make sure it's, how they like it. And that they could also help, since it said like there was a fourth of a cup of the mixture, that they could be able to measure that out too, to put it in the egg roll and maybe even help roll some of them. And then they can always preheat and set timers as well.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great ideas. I like involving kids in the taste testing too. I think that's like one of the funnest things about cooking, is kind of going along and deciding if it needs more of this or more of that. So it's a good thing to involve kids in, to really form those cooking skills. All right. Did anyone from the other egg roll group have any ideas that were mentioned?
Yeah, so we talked about some of those same things. Couple other things was mixing the sauce before you add it to your steamed veggies, spraying the egg rolls when they're completed, when they're on the baking sheet. I make egg rolls actually a lot, a Filipino recipe, and my kids absolutely love being able to wrap them and roll them. We always have to use water to stick and seal them. So that's another job that's really easy for little ones, and it helps them enjoy it a little more because they're actually even touching the food in the midst of making things, which I think they enjoy a lot.
Yeah.
You can, of course, add your own veggies and adjust as needed. I think that was about it.
Awesome. Yeah, those are other great, really good ideas. And yeah, definitely for any recipe, that's something we talk about in other classes as well, but feeling free to substitute anything. So especially if you're trying to involve your kids in a recipe and there's one ingredient they really don't like have them choose something else that they may like, so long as it kind of fits. All right. And then what about our tamale groups?
I can go. I think there was a couple of us that had made tamales before with our kiddos. And so one of the things that they can do is to rinse off the leaves or the corn husks. They can rinse them off and then pat them dry. The kids can also help with mixing the masa, putting in the spices into the masa. They can also help with the filling. And then the older kids can help make 13 older teenager type children. They can help with the meat, cooking the meat, and then taking it from the pan to whatever bowl that you're using to put the tamales together. And then they can help put the tamales together. And I think that was pretty much mostly what we talked about.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Any other ideas for involving kids while making tamales?
I didn't think of this when I picked out this recipe, but I just was reminded of it. We used to make corn husk dolls. So tamales take forever to cook and you always have those leftover corn husks. And so making corn husk dolls is super easy and fun, and the kids can do that afterwards while you're waiting for them to cook.
Yeah, I think those were good recipes.
Kids could
Whoever was sharing can go ahead.
so the kids could help tie the tamale things.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called either, but yes. But I was just gonna say, I think these are all really good recipes to choose because they all have kind of fun, unique steps that you can do. But really, those are really good ideas I can probably use for a lot of other different recipes as well.
Real fast, in the chat, Aisha was asking about cooking helping with fine motor skills or large motor skills more. And so we know that it helps with fine motor skills because they're using their hands and fingers. When we think about large motor skills, we're thinking about throwing footballs, jumping, stepping, that kind of stuff. But cracking eggs, picking off little stems, anything where they're using their fingers or hands is going to really help them create fine motor skills. And then that's also going to create a neurological pathways for other things other than just cooking too. So playing the piano, different kinds of things. Every time we use our hands in a meticulous way, it's creating neurodevelopmental pathways.
Definitely. And like rolling egg rolls, I think that's a really good time to practice motor skills for sure. All right. Well, thank you all so much for doing that activity and for sharing. Now I'm just going to run through a couple of recipes that we have from Cooking Matters and just point out some other kid-friendly steps. Well, very quickly, quick detour before I do that. So I think one of the big reasons that we may want to involve kids in helping in the kitchen is to create buy-in, like I mentioned, and having them actually be interested in eating what we're serving, especially when we have those really picky children at home. But it's not like just a one trick wave of the wand and then everything's fine. So sometimes even if you do involve them, they still may be picky, and that's okay, and it's very frustrating. But I think one good thing to realize is that even if it doesn't seem like it's a fix right in the moment, I think you're still like building those really good behaviors, and it's kind of like a long-term solution, so it may not be a fix right in the moment, but over time, just having more exposure to food, trying new things in different ways, allowing them to have some input is still going to make a big difference, even if it doesn't seem like it right in the moment. So it's just something to keep in mind. But in addition to involving them, is also just making sure that we're modeling healthy behaviors, like I mentioned. So also serving as a good role model for eating healthy. And then, yeah, Sarah mentioned having an alternate for them is a good idea. Also, just having like one healthy food at dinner that they'll eat, especially if you're introducing new things, can be a good thing to do. So kind of like a backup plan, especially if you're trying something new, is also a good idea. Does anyone have any other ideas for what to do if your kids still won't eat, even if you involve them in the food prep and spend time on that part of it?
I would say the one thing that everyone's kind of emphasized on, letting them help choose items, even if it's things they haven't tried before, even just letting them pick it, even if they don't eat it all, letting them try to pick it and try to eat it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really that choice is really important for kids. And they're going to be much more inclined to even want to try it if they felt like they had some say in what it is. Because if you're just telling someone to eat something and they don't want to, they're like, why should I? But if they chose that thing, they're definitely more likely to want to eat it.
And all the research shows that pressure doesn't work, like if you would just like something less if you were really forced. And always when we have an alternate, just don't make it their favorite thing, because then they're always going to choose the alternate, right? If it's their favorite thing to eat, they're never going to eat anything else for dinner except for that one. Like if my daughter would be ramen, if we gave her ramen, that was all she would ever eat. So if you don't like that, you can have, mine was peanut butter and jelly is what we got at school. We didn't bring our lunch money. You get peanut butter and jelly if you don't want to eat your dinner. So you're still going to feed them, but not something so delicious that they're always going to choose that other option. Someone's talking about microwaving. So don't feel bad. When we have to microwave and we're busy, that's fine. Like using the microwave, we can cook vegetables on the microwave. If that's what you have to do to get something healthy on their plate, don't feel bad about that. Microwaves are not good for human bodies, but they're really not that bad for vegetables. Vegetables aren't really alive, so microwaves aren't going to give them cancer or anything like that. Freezer meals, crock pots. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go through the chat a little bit.
Good.
I don't know. Sorry, it's hard when the chat gets long to just zone in on one thing.
I like the 2-bite rule as well. Something we do in our classes sometimes when we have kids that don't want to try things is having them take at least one bite And I forget the saying, it's been a minute since I've used it. But they can, if they don't like it, that's okay. We're just congratulating them for even trying it. That's a big step, but not to like spit it out and like make a big deal out of it. Because especially if you have other kids in the room, like that's going to create like a chain reaction of everyone being like, oh, this is disgusting. So having them take one bite and then also just saying, if you don't like it, that is okay. And we'll try again another time. But yeah, definitely the couple bites is a good strategy.
And then I like it because with 2 bites, they actually have to bite into the food. A lot of kids put the food on their tongue and then they throw it away. So when they actually bite into it, like a lot of times I explain to my kids, when you bite into it, there's sweetness or like some yumminess inside there. So you have to actually take the whole bite and get into the middle.
Are you sure?
You're able to touch it and lick it. Yeah. Okay, after I was just saying that, but yeah. So after he licks it, then see if you can get him to see what the middle tastes like.
All right. Those are all really good ideas. So we won't go into this too much just for the sake of time. And I'm sure you all have pretty good ideas on this, but just being a role model for your kids around healthy eating. Kids, really anyone is more likely to do as we do and not do as we say. So just kind of along the same lines. So just making sure that you're being conscious of that, especially if you're trying to get your kids to eat healthier, is making sure that you're modeling those good behaviors. And just thinking about that at mealtime as well. And then after we've made our dinner, mealtime is also important. I think this is oftentimes pretty stressed throughout most things, but having that time to eat together is just as important as cooking it together. And even if you don't have time to have your kids involved in the kitchen, if you do have some time to eat a meal together, I think that's a really good time to still kind of implement the same ideas that you may get when you're in the kitchen. So there's a handout in your packets about this as well, but just some tips. One thing is that family meals doesn't always have to mean dinner. So if you have a lot of things going on, if you get off of work and you're just like making something really quick and there's like 1,000 different things going on, you don't have to feel like you have to sit down and eat dinner together every night. I think that's like the ideal that everyone says we should be doing, and it's a great concept, but it's not always reality in practice. So even if it's just, breakfast on a Sunday morning or snack time, regardless, if you have some time to eat together and to talk about meals, I think whenever you have time for it is a good time to do it. Giving everyone a job. So even if you can't involve kids directly in the kitchen, having them do other things like maybe setting the table, or getting cups of water for everybody, or gathering the dishes after everyone's done eating. So having everyone take at least one job, no matter how big or small. When you do have those family meals together, focusing on each other, this is a really good time to talk about things and just focus on each other and not on our cell phones or on the TV when we do have time to do so. Setting some ground rules before dinner can be a good idea. I think there's some good ideas in the handout about what those ground rules may be. But a good one may be just not to have your phone at the table so that we can focus on each other. And then also making mealtime a learning time. So again, if you don't have time to involve the kids while you're cooking, this can still be a good time to talk about like the different foods and why we're incorporating them. Does anyone have any other strategies you use for mealtime that you want to share? If so, you can do it in the chat. All right, now I'm gonna run through some recipes really quickly and then I'm gonna do our cooking demo. So peanut butter and banana packets, this is a really good like after school snack or breakfast. So bananas are a good one when you're starting to get your kids to cut things because they're really soft and easy to cut. You can cut them with a butter knife, so that's a good time to practice those skills. Or you can have them choose whatever fruit they want. So it doesn't have to be bananas, it could be pears or apples. So giving them the choice for that. Having them spread the peanut butter on the tortilla is a good step for kids to do. And then the older kids can definitely make this like after school if they wanted to. Smoothies is a really good one. This one's pretty easy and simple, but having them choose whatever they want in there and then having them blend it. In my experience, again, with kids, the noisy blender is really exciting for some reason. So that's a good time to do that. I also think this is kind of a good time to use that more like sciencey aspect of it. So maybe instead of following like an exact recipe, you just kind of put some things in a blender and then decide what you need more of. If you need more liquid, if it's too thick, or if it's really thin and runny, like what can we add to it? And then also, I think this is always a good time to add greens because you usually can't taste them. And a good time to talk about that as well. This yogurt parfait is another good like breakfast or snack. So having them measure out the different things and then also just layering it is usually pretty exciting for kids, especially if you do have like clear cups. So you can kind of form like this nice parfait look. And then again, they can choose the fruits, or if you have like different granolas, you can also make your own granola. That's also a Cooking Matters recipe. And then the mac and cheese, grating cheese is a good one for kids, or having them measure out the different things for the sauces, or stirring everything together at the end. This one we usually put broccoli in. So instead of cutting broccoli, you can sometimes just like snap the pieces of broccoli off. And then maybe if you want to make them smaller, you can go back in with your knife, but having them start with that, or choosing a different vegetable to put in there. And then salads isn't always necessarily maybe the most kid-friendly thing we could think of. But again, we want our kids to eat more fruits and veggies. So having them have some say in this is a great time. So this is like one of our framework recipes where you kind of just choose things to put in. So this is a really good time to have your kids choose between maybe two different options that you have in your pantry or your house. And then also again, tearing up those greens or maybe some other vegetables that I have in there. And these are some different snack ideas, which have some kid-friendly steps in them. I'm not going to go through all of them. But if this isn't in your handout, I don't think it is. We can also send this out if you want more snack ideas. All right. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this pineapple carrot muffin recipe, which is really good. And even though it has carrots in it, I feel like almost every child likes this. So I'm going to switch over to my kitchen camera really quickly, and I'll be back shortly. In the meantime, if you have any other ideas for kid-friendly steps, if you want to share those in the chat, or other recipes you make that you involve your kids in, feel free to share those too.
And when Taylor gets over to the kitchen, I'll look at there was a couple questions in the chat. So protein is super important for kids. So yes, we do want them to get their protein. If you think about protein, like meat is made out of muscles and like the actual body of the animal. And so our bodies, as we're growing, we need those building blocks to put in to make our bodies grow. So kids definitely need protein. If all they will eat is chicken, you want to give them chicken, okay? But don't forget, there's a lot of different kinds of protein. There's grains that have protein, like quinoa. Like you could throw quinoa in a smoothie and they wouldn't know it's there. Nuts and seeds can go in smoothies as well. Seeds have really good amino acids for their brains as they're growing too. So nuts and seeds, beans, and soybeans. I don't know if you guys have seen the edamame pods before, but it's fun because you can actually like make it a game and you can squeeze the edamame and the beans pop out. And it's not like, not everybody likes tofu, but pretty much I haven't met a kid that doesn't like edamame. So that's super easy. You just dump it in boiling water, dump it out, and then you can pop it. You can even play it with your kids and pop the beans into their mouths and they can pop it into yours. That's kind of fun. But yeah, kids need protein. So sometimes we're not getting the variety that we want, but at least we're getting in something. If your child is allergic to pineapple, what would be your next pick for that replacement? And any sweet fruit. So I would say a peach would be my replacement because we make peach salsa. So we've been like making our mango salsa recipe, but with peaches. Or my friend, she makes it with pineapple. So you can do either any kind of sweet soft fruit would be a good replacement.
I'd also say one thing that the pineapple really adds to this recipe, in my opinion, is moisture. So I would also maybe try applesauce because that's pretty moist, or like mashed banana would maybe be good too.
The carrots and zucchini will add to this recipe too. I didn't realize you're already there. Can we make you big, Taylor? I'm gonna try to make you big.
I tried to. I don't see it as an option, but maybe. If
Does she
can
look big to you guys? I pinned her for me. Is she pinned for you guys? No. Okay, let me try again.
I just changed her.
You got
So,
her? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to be making our pineapple carrot muffin recipe, like I mentioned. So first thing, I'm just going to preheat my oven to 350. And then, so for this recipe, we're using carrots and pineapples, but like we mentioned, there's some other ideas that you can put in there if you don't like those. So this is a good time to use some whole grains and some added fruits and vegetables, which are always things that we want to get more in our kids' diet. So the first thing I'm going to talk about really quickly is some knife safety. So especially if you have older kids at home that you want to start teaching them how to cook or how to cut things, these are really good things just to have in mind. So generally speaking, chef's knives are always good to use, but you can definitely use smaller knives for your kids at home. So some things that we like to teach our kids when we do have them cut in class is to make sure that they are holding the knife correctly. So making sure they're holding the handle of the knife and not putting their fingers like on the blade. So keeping those nice and far back, but also making sure that they're holding it firmly. So sometimes if people are afraid of knives, they'll like hold it back here, which it doesn't give you good leverage and actually makes this a lot more dangerous, even though it feels like it's further away from you. So making sure they're holding it firmly. And then some people grab up here. It's usually better just to keep your fingers on the handle, but whatever works. And then so for cutting things, especially for kids, we always want to try to have a flat surface. I'm going to shred this carrot, so I'm not really going to cut it, but just to demonstrate some things here. Another thing we always teach our kids is to try to keep the point of our chef's knife on the cutting board, and then doing what we call the motion in the ocean. So kind of thinking of our knife as like a dolphin, like going through the ocean. That's kind of the movement we want to have. So as opposed to like just going downward with a lot of force, that's kind of dangerous. We want to do more of like this type motion. So keeping our knife on the cutting board as much as possible will make it safer, and then also make cutting things a lot easier. And then for kids, we always want to make sure that they're not cutting their fingertips off. So something we always teach is to use the bear claw. So that's nice and memorable for kids. But if we're using the bear claw, all of our fingertips are tucked back, so we can't accidentally cut our fingertips off. So even if the knife is up against my knuckles, it's not going to actually cut anything. So if you are starting to teach your kids how to cut things, being really mindful of having them reinforce that. It is a little bit awkward when you're first learning it because your hand just kind of defaults to whatever feels like the most secure, but just reinforcing that bear claw so their fingertips are always out of the way. And then another one to teach kids, which doesn't really work as well for my carrot here. I'm not going to actually cut through this. But if it were something smaller where the bear claw doesn't really make sense, another thing that we do teach is the bridge. So again, making sure your fingertips are out of the way and the knife is between here. I probably wouldn't do it with this carrot because this carrot's going to roll around. I'd want it to be like a flat surface first. But having that, another different strategy for keeping our fingertips out of the way. So that being said, I'm not really going to do much cutting with this carrot because I'm going to grate it so it can go into our muffins. So this is a really good step for kids to do, especially a little bit older kids, just because the carrot is pretty firm and hard to grate. But it is a Good stuff for kids. Like Jesse mentioned, you could also use zucchini instead. The zucchini also has a lot of moisture in it, so that would be good as well.
You can make muffins with anything that you want. So muffins, you get the basic, and we'll send you guys this. You might already have it in your packet, but a framework is just, you need to have the flour and the baking powder and all that part of it, right? But whatever fruits and vegetables, you can throw pretty much anything in there. It could be a peach, a pear, a carrot, a zucchini, a sweet potato. It could be anything. So you're allowed to get creative. You just need to know the like how much to add so that the bread doesn't get too heavy or anything like that.
So this would be a thing if I were having a kid grate my carrot, is just to be mindful of once it gets down to the little parts, being really cognizant of where their fingertips are, and then stopping whenever it feels necessary to. And then the recipe says to grate a carrot and then to measure out 3/4 of a cup for your muffins. I always just grate the entire carrot and stick it in there because why not have a little extra carrot? It's usually a very tiny amount left over anyway. So we're just gonna put our grated carrot into a bowl. And then for the muffins, we are going to mix all of our wet ingredients and then add that to all of our dry ingredients. So in addition to the carrot, we're going to use some pineapple. We want to get pineapple that's canned in 100% juice, not one that's canned in any sort of syrup, because we're going to put the entire thing into our muffins. So you can either do like the pineapple tidbits. I got this one just because it's 8 ounces, so I don't have to measure anything. But also you could do crushed pineapple. And then whenever I do that and I have leftovers, I usually just freeze it and then put it into smoothies later, like in ice cube trays. So add our pineapple. And then we're going to use 5 tablespoons of canola oil. So measuring is a really good one for kids. If fractions and things like that aren't quite up their alley yet, I'm just having them count along with you as you're measuring whatever out. So for this one, counting to 5 with them is a nice and easy thing to do. Then we're also going to add a tablespoon of vinegar. And then a 1/4 cup of water. And that's going to be all of our wet ingredients.
And
That'd be
does the vinegar make the carrot soft? Is that why there's vinegar in this recipe?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know.
I was wondering that. I don't know either.
All right. And so then having them stir would be a good thing to involve our younger kids in. So we're gonna stir all of our wet ingredients together and then we'll just set them aside for now. And for our dry ingredients, the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, but we're gonna use whole wheat flour instead, just to get more whole grains in. I think this is a good recipe to do that, even if you or your kids don't traditionally like whole wheat baked goods. I think because there is so much moisture from the pineapple and everything else that I think the thing that we usually don't like about whole grains is how dense they are. But I think how much moisture is in here really counteracts that and you can't even really tell. So I would encourage you, if you do try this recipe, to try it just with whole wheat flour. And then if you don't love it, maybe do half and half and see if you like that better. So it calls for 1.5 cups. So I'm gonna measure out 3 half cups for that.
I love this recipe with whole wheat flour. Like I tried it with half whole wheat flour and half the regular flour, and I just thought it was just too mushy. Like I think something about the whole wheat flour and the pineapple together just makes it so much yummier. And it gives it some oomph.
And then we're gonna add 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. For some reason, despite the fact that I teach cooking classes, can only find one measuring cup. So I'm just gonna use the same one. And we're just gonna estimate the half a cup or the 1/4 cup, since it's 3/4 cup. So do our half a cup and then half of this. So again, a good time to practice math. And we're gonna add a teaspoon of baking soda or baking powder. For this one, either works. The recipe does call for baking soda, but. And then we're gonna do some cinnamon. And the recipe has an optional ingredient. It's either nutmeg or pumpkin pie spice. I don't have either of those, so I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of allspice, but you could definitely just skip that if you wanted. And then that's all of our dry ingredients. So we can go ahead and mix those together. And then for muffins, the texture is usually the best if you don't overmix it too much. So a good strategy for that is just to create like a little well in the bottom of all of your dry ingredients, and then pour your wet ingredients in and then mix them. So kids could also pour those in and then stir them. So you just want to stir it until everything's combined.
Do you guys have favorite muffin recipes? Put those in the chat too. I'm gonna put one in. It's kind of like this one. It's basically the same framework, but it has a couple different.
All right. And once we have this all mixed, I have some leftover walnuts, so I'm gonna add those too. Also add really any nut, or if you liked raisins, you can put those in there. And then the full recipe for this also has like a frosting recipe, like a healthier frosting recipe if you wanted to make it more like cupcakes instead of muffins. So we can link that too. And then we're gonna spray our, which would be another good step for kids to do, or you can also use like the paper muffin cups and have them put those in. And then finally, you can have them transfer the mix into the muffin tins. If you have like a 1/4 cup, I find that works pretty well for getting the right amount. I do not, so I'm just gonna use a spoon, but whatever you have at home would work.
And just so you guys know, I make this recipe, it uses a half a can. So she had that small little can of pineapple, but if you get a big can of pineapple, you can make 24 muffins. And my family of 4 will eat all 24 of these muffins in about a day and a half, which is not the goal. The goal is to spread them out throughout the week and use them for breakfast and stuff like that. But they're so good that they get eaten right away. And the frosting is kind of makes it almost like a carrot cake, because this frosting it's like a cream cheese sour cream frosting. So it makes it like a little mini carrot cake muffin, but it's healthy. So it's kind of good.
These muffins also freeze really well. So if you didn't want to eat a dozen muffins in a couple days, you could also, if you wanted to double it, just freeze them and then have them on hand for like a snack or as part of a breakfast. And then you can just throw them in the microwave for like 30 seconds.
And Angelica just asked about the eggs. Like, so cooking eggs with kids, raw eggs and salmonella, it's pretty rare for a kid to get salmonella from an egg. It's not Rocky where they're cracking 3 eggs in a cup and chugging them all like that. Like kids probably don't want to do that, but I think after they crack the egg, wash your hands, they'll be fine. And then usually when it's cooked, it's 100% fine.
That's also another good opportunity to talk about like the importance of hand washing.
Yeah.
And how to... All right. So I'm just gonna throw these in the oven for I think like 18 minutes. I'll double check really quickly before I join back on our PowerPoint, but I'll show you all what they look like once I pull them out too. And we'll meet you back at my computer shortly.
Yeah, and thank you guys for sharing your muffin recipes. I'm gonna write these ones down. And so breakfast bars are another great one for like make a healthy snack once, and then they can take it with them to school or eat it after school. Yeah, I'll put this recipe in the chat right now. Good, hold on. It's gonna take me a second. Hold on.
I was a little wrong. I'm gonna bake them for 20 to 25 minutes. And then yes, we can definitely send out this recipe. Or if Jesse, if you want to find it from the website and put it in the chat.
I am, it's just taking me a second.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that someone's already making muffins. Does anyone have any questions about the recipe? All right. So now we're going to change gears a little bit and we're going to talk about grocery shopping. So if anyone wants to put in the chat if you have strategies that you already use, because I don't have children myself, but I acknowledge the fact that going to the grocery store and trying to make good choices and not be stressed out when you have kids running around is very difficult, especially if you have really young kids. So if anyone has any ideas, go while the kids are in school, definitely. Also, banana coffee cake sounds delicious. So definitely do share that if you find it. Rachel says, make a menu, look in the pantry to see what you already have, and then make a list and do a grocery pickup. Yeah, definitely. I think that's not as much what we're talking about today, but we do talk about that a lot. That's like one of the best ways to meal plan. That's a great idea. Giving your kids a clipboard and having them cross off the items is a really good way. and giving them items to find. Here's some other ideas on if you do have to bring your kids to the store. So giving them a job is a good one. So whoever said like the clipboard, having them cross off the items is a good thing, or just having them read off the list. Again, this is a good time to have them choose something. So even if it's something as simple as like, should we get green apples or red apples? Or should we get broccoli or cauliflower? So really simple choices. Making it kind of more like a game. So maybe if you're buying something by like a weight, having your kids guess what the weight is going to be, or guess like which option is going to be cheaper, which we're going to talk about in a second. Using when/then. So when we've picked out all of our vegetables, then we can go pick out a cereal or something like that. Hopefully a healthier cereal and not one that's just sugar, but using those strategies, especially when kids are like hyper focused on one item. Timing your visit. So for this, thinking about kind of aligning when you're going to the grocery store with your kids' schedules. So if you can do it when they're at school and you don't even have to worry about bringing them to the grocery store, that's a great idea. But if you do, making sure, they've had a snack beforehand. So like making these muffins and then going to the store so they're not hungry and whining about that at the store. And then also just setting expectations before you even shop.
Emily, you're all big. You might want to turn on your movie. Yeah.
So sending older kids to get things and then having them pick stuff out and put it in the cart is a good one. Older kids can also push the shopping cart. I think that kind of depends on your kids, whether you can trust them to do that and not run people over or make it a game, but that's a good win too. And then giving them a list and having them go get things within close proximity is a good idea. Jesse, do you have any other tips for shopping with kids?
Did you say unit pricing? Because teaching them that little one in the corner that has a unit price and not the actual price, and you tell them to go find the cheapest of the one, the certain one that you can find, and then you don't even have to stress. You can pick it out. If they have even older kids, go find. Someone is asking about natural peanut butters. Just say, look at all these peanut butters and figure out which one doesn't have sugar in it, and then that can be their job too. So. And then someone was talking about picking up produce with older kids, and so if you teach kids, and we have a handout on this, is cooking veggies 5 ways or whatever. So you think about it, you can steam, saute, boil, roast. Roasting is almost the most delicious way. You can really pick out any vegetable at the store. Just say like, pick out something you haven't tried yet. And then think about it when you take it home, and what way are you going to cook it? So really you can pick out anything in the produce section, as long as you know how to cook it or look up a recipe afterwards, and you can try. Pushing the cart is a very useful skill if you're willing to apologize to everyone in their way and let them know, my God, I always say, baby driver coming through with that shopping cart.
I think especially if you are involving your kids in cooking, especially as you get more progressed in that, having them pick out things is a really good thing to do to kind of like reinforce those things. And again, that autonomy there. I like the $5 limit to pick out healthy snacks too. That's a good idea. It's also a good time to talk about nutrition and what makes a snack healthy or not.
We covered like going not hungry, right? Bringing a snack with you already. If you're not the person that likes, a lot of grocery stores, the kids are allowed to eat a piece of fruit in the grocery store. But if you're not that person that doesn't want them to eat something without paying for it first, which is a good lesson, bring a little snack and a banana or something healthy with you. So that way when they're saying, I want this, then you can say, no, this is your snack. Or what I tell my kids is before you prep them before you go into the store. Okay. Especially if you have a difficult one, say, I know, okay, we're getting ready to go into the grocery store. What are the rules? Okay. We're not going to run. We're not going to shout. Okay. And then I say, if you guys are good the whole time that you are in the grocery store, then I will let you pick out one snack. So they're not picking out 10 snacks. I want this. And then 5 seconds later, they're like, oh, I also want this. No, you only get one. And so if they change their mind as they move through the grocery store, then they have to put the other one back and they get that one treat. And then if they are bad or start yelling or throwing a fit in the grocery store, then at the end, when we're at the checkout aisle, when we're about to leave, not beforehand, then I say, you know what, you threw a fit, so we're not going to get this today. And then maybe the fit gets worse, but you're already halfway at the checkout at that point. So yeah, letting them choose. Choice. Every time we give our kids a choice, we're empowering them and not trying to control them. And so they don't feel like there's going to be a battle going on.
I also like the picking out produce. I know it can be kind of overwhelming, but having like teaching them how to choose things and how to identify those, I think that's also a good skill to have in talking about how to do so.
My kids are totally in charge in the produce section. Well, in fruit, I pick up vegetables that I know for a recipe that I'm going to make. But when it comes to fruit, okay, guys, go pick 2 fruits that you want for the week, you know? And if they come back with something that's like $30, I'll go pick another one. That was too expensive. But like, yeah, usually having them pick the 2 fruits, it just takes stress off my plate. I don't have to worry about which ones we are getting.
Those are good too, because fruits are usually snacks in and of themselves. So if they're choosing them, again, they're probably going to be more likely to reach for those instead of maybe the less healthy snacks we may have available. So Jesse mentioned unit price. So if you all haven't seen this before, I did want to talk about this for our kids and then also for us as well. I think it's a really good thing to be mindful of if you haven't used this before. So when you go to the grocery store, there's always going to be the retail price. So that's the price that you're going to pay out of pocket for whatever you're purchasing. But also there should be up in the corner a unit price. And I think some grocery stores are better than others at actually displaying these, but hopefully they have these. If not, we can still figure it out. We just have to do a little bit of math. But this is a really good thing to utilize to compare different items. So if it's like different sizes of things, like if it's a bigger bag of something versus a smaller bag, and deciding if you're actually saving money by buying the bigger bag, and if so, if it's worth it or not. And then you can also use this to compare like different items in general or different like forms of things, which I'll elaborate on because I'm being very vague right now. But the way we can find this if we don't actually have the calculated price is just using a little bit of math. So there's 16 ounces in a pound. So if we have like 5 pounds, I mean, we could divide this by 5 and then figure out what it is per pound. That's how they figured out this one. And then if you wanted to figure it out per ounce, you could take this 70 cents and divide that by 16 to get the per ounce. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's a good example. So this is comparing a pound of carrots, so just regular carrots, versus baby carrots versus buying carrots in bulk. So buying just a pound of carrots is $1.49 per pound in this example. To buy the baby carrots for the same amount, so again, 1 pound, it's $1.99. And then buying the carrots in bulk, so buying 5 pounds of carrots, even though you're paying a little bit more, it's 70 cents per pound. So this would be a good time to think about, does my family actually eat carrots, or are these going to sit in my fridge and go bad? Or do I have a recipe in mind where I'll be using carrots? And so if so, I think it's a good time to buy the bulk and save more per pound, because I mean, that's almost half the price per pound if you're buying in bulk. And then again, comparing it to baby carrots are usually going to be, unless they're on sale, they're usually going to be more expensive than whole carrots, just because they're not actually baby carrots. You're just paying them to make them into the shape. So that's a good thing to consider too, is if your kids really like baby carrots, will they eat whole carrots if you take the time to sit there and chop them into sticks? Or is it worth it for you to pay more per pound just to have the convenience of knowing that they're going to eat them, or that you don't have to spend the time doing so? And we'll talk about unit price a little bit more too. But another thing I want to talk about is reading food labels. So this is another good thing to think about when we're going to the grocery store. So these kind of highlight the different things that we want to focus on. So especially for like processed items or things that may be in bulk, I think an important thing to consider is the serving size. I think a good example of this is cereal. So a lot of the times a serving size of cereal is like a cup or less, sometimes even like half a cup or a quarter cup if it's like granola, which is really kind of a small amount. And I think especially kids, you know, they just pour a bunch of cereal in a bowl, and then you have to multiply all of this times whatever, which, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily want to calculate that for every bowl of cereal, but it's just something to think about, is how many servings are we actually eating? So being cognizant of the serving size and then how many servings per container is a good thing to know. So the red things on here highlight the things that we want to be mindful of not getting too much of. So for the total fat, I would say, generally speaking, we don't care too much about that. It's the next two lines that we really want to kind of focus more on. So the saturated fat and the trans fat. So just to talk about those very, very briefly. So saturated fat is okay to eat in moderation. We just don't want to consume too much of it, because in combination with other things, if we're eating a lot of this over time, that's generally speaking what contributes to like heart disease, and all of the bad things that come with that. And then trans fat is essentially the same as saturated fat. It's just also man-made. So it's really just not very good for you. So those are the two things that we want to kind of limit when we're thinking about fat. Because then the rest of this, so if you take this, the total fat, and you subtract the saturated and the trans fat, the rest of that's going to be unsaturated fat. And the unsaturated fat is our healthier kind of fat. So that's the one that gives us like the healthy benefits of consuming fat. So we don't really have to worry about that. Cholesterol, I wouldn't really focus too much on this unless you have like an issue with cholesterol and your doctor's told you otherwise. But really cholesterol, dietary cholesterol doesn't really affect your blood cholesterol that much. It's more so that saturated and trans fat. So I wouldn't really focus on this too much. And then sodium, so added salt is in a lot of things, and too much added salt can contribute to high blood pressure. So that's another thing to be mindful of, especially if we're choosing like processed items. So if you look at like a frozen meal, for example, typically speaking, it's probably going to have like at least half of your daily sodium recommendation, which is okay sometimes, but maybe not something we want to be eating every single day, just because over time that's going to add up. And then for sugars, again, we don't really care too much about the total sugars. The line that we really want to pay attention to here is the added sugars, because those are going to be essentially like non-nutritive. So there's just going to be sugar without any other benefit to it. So we want to try to limit those as well. And then things that we want to get more of course, is the fiber. So fiber is really good. And then protein, and then all of these vitamins. So over here, if you see the percentage of daily values, so these don't necessarily correspond to everyone's diet perfectly, but I think it's a good rule of thumb to consider when we're thinking about these things. So if something is 5% or less, it's considered to be low in that nutrient. So for example, the saturated fat has 5%, so it's low in saturated fat. So that's something we can think about. And then 20% or more means it's high in, or like a good source of, if it's something good. So for this one, it has 10 grams of added sugar. So it's high in added sugar. but then it also has 45% of our iron. So that's also a good source of iron. Do you have anything you want to add about the nutrition label, Jessie?
No, just sometimes they don't list these vitamins and nutrients at the bottom, and I don't know why they don't list those. I like it takes too much time or something, or it takes too much space, but sometimes there are nutrients in there that they don't list. They have to list this bad stuff at the top. But if you know that it has lots of nutrition in it, like it could be there, it just might not be listed. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, I don't either. But yeah, oftentimes things will have other vitamins in it that aren't on the label. So that is a good thing to be mindful of.
But I think how you talked about the percentage, looking at the percentage is so much easier than looking at the grams, because unless you are like, we're nutritionists, but I still don't know how many grams of fiber we need every day unless I look it up. So looking at the percentage is more helpful. Yeah. Actually, I do. It's 15 because I had to look it up about 30 times.
I included this slide, even though I think at this point, almost every label has switched to the new label. So they changed it a couple of years ago, a year or two ago. So they added the serving size. They made that a lot more prominent than it used to be, because we realized that's an important thing to highlight. And then they also added this added sugars line. But sometimes you may see the old label still that doesn't have those pulled out. So just to be aware of that. I'm going to step away very quickly to pull my muffins out of the oven, and then I'll be right back.
So in the chat a little bit, we're talking about different apps, and there are all kinds of apps, right? Everyone makes money off of apps. So there's apps to help you make grocery lists. There's apps to help you lose weight. There's apps to help you. I don't know. There's all kinds of stuff, but yeah, check them out because there's lots of different ones. Unfortunately, the Cooking Matters one is only for Android, so we'll try and get them to make it for. Are they done? Are they cooling off, Taylor?
Yes. All right, so to use this nutrition label in action, this is another good thing we can use to compare like different options and decide which one we want to get. So usually fresh produce doesn't come with a nutrition label, so you wouldn't necessarily use that for this case. But a good example for like canned items is comparing the amount of salt that is oftentimes in our canned items. So for this one, the carrots have a little bit of natural sodium in them. We're not really concerned about that too much. But this version here on the right, the regular version, has 16% of our daily sodium recommendation per half a cup. And chances are we may consume more than half a cup because it's a pretty small amount. Versus this no salt added version only has the 2%, which is exactly the amount that's already in the carrots themselves. So also a good thing to be aware of is the ingredient list. So the ingredients will be listed in terms of the highest percentage of whatever is in that container. So most of this container is full of carrots, and then the second most ingredient is salt, and then it's water. So. And then to combine these two, so you can use the unit price and the nutrition label pretty much all throughout the grocery store when you're making decisions, and then also teaching your kids these things so they can also utilize them. So for ground beef here, so our 80% lean ground beef over here on the left is $2.99 per pound. Versus our ground beef, the 93% lean is $5.99 per pound. So it's almost twice the amount per pound. And then the ground patties here on the further right are in between here, the 85% lean, and they're $5.39 per pound. And along with most things that we're buying, usually buying it in its like least modified form is going to be cheaper. So because they've formed these into patties, they're going to charge a little bit more. But also, unfortunately, the leaner ground beef is more expensive.
But you can buy the cheaper one and drain the fat off when you cook it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pay more for that expensive one if you drain it or cook it on the grill because it drips.
So here's the comparison of the nutrition facts labels for those two different ones. So the 93% lean ground beef, again, we're mostly focused on the saturated fat here. So we can look at calories and stuff, but that's really kind of the big thing, especially for any proteins that we're purchasing. So the saturated fat has about 15% per serving, which is about 4 ounces. So that's roughly like the size of the palm of our hand, is about 4 ounces when we're thinking about proteins. Versus the 80% lean ground beef for the same serving size has almost half of our daily saturated fat. So it's a pretty significant difference. So that's something to keep in mind. But like Jesse mentioned, we can drain the fat off. I think a good alternative too is, I didn't include this, but ground turkey. And then also maybe mixing that with the ground beef. So you're still getting the ground beef flavor, but the ground turkey is usually comparable in price to the 80% ground beef, but has the nutrition label more or less of the 93% lean beef. And then you can also look at some other things. So for the protein, the lean ground beef is going to have a little bit more protein just because there's less fat to take up that space. So it's going to have more protein as well. And then another example, we can compare this with like different forms of any meat we're purchasing. So again, buying it in its wholest form is usually going to be the cheapest option. I think this is very well illustrated when it comes to buying chicken, because a whole chicken is, and this is usually how it is in the grocery store. It may change every now and then, but is about 99 cents per pound. Versus like chicken breasts are $4.99 per pound. So about 5 times the amount per pound, just because it's the chicken breast, you're paying them to process the meats and then only paying for that portion of it. And then like chicken tenders, I think are even more, like they're sometimes like $6 or $7 per pound, which is kind of crazy. Because you could just take these chicken breasts and cut them into tender shapes and have that ready to go.
And then we tend to think that like, oh, but there's bones in that chicken, so we're paying for the bones. But if you think about like the Native American principle of like use every little bit of it, like I have a friend who will cook down those bones into literally nothing and then use them for really good soups too. We can still use that part of the chicken as well. Definitely buy best at Sam's Club because it's only $1.99 a pound.
Oh wow, that's nice.
Bone broth is super good for you. So if you do buy a whole chicken, do that with the bones and put that in things because good. I mean, it's good in so many ways. We can't get into that. Sorry.
I also think it's good to be mindful of how many servings are actually being yielded when you're thinking about unit price and comparing those different options. This nutrition fact label here is for the can of black beans, but so I'll talk about that just in a second. So this one, the can of black beans, so this is the regular version, so it does have added salt. So if you were to eat the entire can of black beans, you get 70% of your daily sodium, which is quite a lot, although it does also have 100% of our daily fiber, which is nice. But a good alternative for that, even though canned black beans are pretty affordable, are dried black beans. So even though these look like they're more expensive because it's per pound and it's about twice the amount per pound, the yield you'll get from this bag of black beans is a lot more than this can of black beans. So I should have included that so you can see exactly how many cups it yields, but it is, do you know by any chance, Jesse?
Yeah, it's times 3. So one bag of beans will make 3 pounds of food. And honestly, a bag of black beans is only 99 cents. I don't know why that's on here. And you can get black beans for free. Like, come to Care and Share, we will give you a bag of black beans anytime. So that's about 30 cents a pound after you cook it. So a $1 bag makes 3 pounds of food. So about 30 cents for a good protein compared to, you think about how much steak and stuff like that costs. It's crazy.
Mhm. And the other nice benefit is the bag of black beans doesn't have any added salt in it. So you don't have to worry about that at all. All right, so those were the main points to cover for our grocery shopping and our cooking together in the kitchen. So just to kind of re-highlight the things that we talked about, even though it may not seem necessarily like it in the moment, having your kids involved in the kitchen or even with grocery shopping can ultimately make your job easier. Maybe again, not right in the moment, but over time, especially if you're trying to get them to try and like new foods. It's always good to start young. So no matter how old your kids are, you can probably find something for them to do in the kitchen, and then kind of transition those steps as we get older. And then just remember, again, trying to enforce that positive environment. So to keep calm, even if it may get messy and a little bit stressful sometimes, it's really another opportunity where practice really goes a long way in making that a better experience for everyone. If anyone has any questions or things that you were hoping to learn that you didn't, if you want to put those in the chat too as we're wrapping up here, feel free. So some other resources to share. Jesse mentioned the Cooking Matters app, which is unfortunately still Android only for some reason. Cooking Matters also does have a Facebook page. They go live every Thursday. So they're a lot shorter than these classes. I think they're usually about like 20 minutes. So if you just want some other ideas, you can feel free to go on the Cooking Matters Facebook page. I think they're also a good page just to follow if you use Facebook a lot, just to get some like meal ideas and ideas for eating healthier just in your newsfeed as you're scrolling through. And then if you don't have an Android, all of our recipes are on our website, which is just cookingmatters.org. So they're all healthy, and they're all designed to feed a family of 4 for $10 or less. So they're all really budget friendly too. And then there's some other good information as well. And then if anyone is interested, we are doing a grocery store tour tomorrow. So if anyone wants to come, it'll have some of the information I just talked about grocery shopping, but a lot of other ideas as well. And then you can also come. We're making trail mix for kids. So if you want to come and do that, feel free.
Pardon me, Taylor. I noticed on the flyer that it says Hillside Community Center, but it provides a Pueblo address.
I just saw that as well.
Yeah, okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. Pardon me. I just didn't. Yeah.
No worries. Jesse, is this in Colorado Springs or in Pueblo? I don't know if Jesse's still here. I'll clarify on that. But I'm pretty sure it is at the Hillside Community Center. I can send it out in an email though, if you guys are interested in coming. And then another thing, if anyone is interested, I'll put the link in the chat. But we have another program called Text to Live Healthy. So it's really geared towards parents. So if you are interested, you sign up, and they just send you a couple text messages a week, just giving ideas for other ways to incorporate some healthy behaviors and ideas. So I'll put the link in the chat if anyone wants to join. And then the final thing I have for you is we do have a survey. If you wouldn't mind filling this out, please. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes, and it is all anonymous. So I'm going to put the link. The first question it's going to ask is for this program code. So that's this E10 thing, and I'll put this in the chat too. And that's really helpful for us because we do give gift cards for these classes. So not only does it give you a chance to give feedback and us to learn from that and improve our classes or know what we're doing well, but also helps us with our funding too. So if you could please take the time to do the survey, that'd be really appreciated. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing so I can put those links in the chat.
So Eliza, you like Text to Live Healthy, huh?
Yes, I worked at an early learning center, gosh, like 2018, I think, and it had just rolled out. It's incredible. And as like the ages of my kids get older, it sends me more appropriate like exercise activities or family walk ideas or food ideas, and it's just been incredible. And then since it comes in like daily, it reminds me, did you get your water today, and stuff like that. Like it's not personalized necessarily, but even just getting a text from them reminds me to look through like the week of text messages that they sent, and then use whatever ideas that they sent.
Cool. That's good to know, because we have some ladies create the messages for that. So it's good to know what's helpful.
Oops.
Hold on. I have a thing for that. Hold on.
Jesse, question for you. So I shared the flyer for the Hillside store tour tomorrow. And it says Hillside Community Center, but it also has an address for Pueblo. Can you clarify where that's being held? And then for everyone else, I just put the link and the course code in the chat here. And then I'll also give the link for anyone who's interested in the Text to Live Healthy too. Oh yeah, I did pull my muffins out of the oven, but I'll go grab them really quick so you can see them. So my lighting is not the best, but here's a finished muffin here. And so I used like the largest grater of on my carrot when I was grating my carrot. So I don't know if you can really see that very well, but if you wanted, you could also use like a smaller size so that the carrot's like more incorporated and you can't see it as well.
I can't find the Text to Live Healthy flyers right now, but it's like you just text the number to a thing. So I will bring those to Miss Deborah when I bring you guys your gift cards.
Sounds good. I also put the registration link in the chat. And then Jesse, I don't know if you heard me, but I shared the flyer for the Hillside tour tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And it says it's at the Hillside Community Center, but it has an address in Pueblo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. It's at 925 South Institute.
Okay.
Okay, so it's on Fountain and Institute. Yeah. And it's a drop-in class, so you can come anytime between 5 and 7. And you can bring the kids too, because there'll be a little trail mix that the kids can make at the end. You can come too, Deborah.
Okay, I'm listening.
Jesse, I
Oh.
put the text to live healthy chat number in there, the text number. I just don't know if you click join or, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Thank you for doing that.
So,
I think it says on here. Let me look real quick.
Okay, so if that's the number, then you're gonna text this 877-877 to that number, and then they remind you to eat healthy every day, which some people like that and not everybody does.
yeah, there's also jobs on here that are related to food, and there's recipes and like how to grow food in your kitchen. I mean, I don't know, it's just really great.
It must have grown. They must have added a lot of material to that. Because when I first did it, it was just like drink water, eat your veggies,
Right.
drink water, eat your
Right.
veggies. But so now there's more.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Now it's like information on the PEBT. The family that plays together stays fit together. Write down 5 to 10 physical activities or games on pieces of paper. Healthy snacks. I mean, there's a ton of stuff.
Super
Cooking
cool.
Matters ads.
All right. Was everyone able to access the survey okay?
And we will also be sending a survey to all the families. And in order for you to receive the gift cards, we need to have the surveys completed. So completing the surveys triggers our sending you the gift cards. So you receive one from Care and Share or Cooking Matters, and then you receive one from Parents Challenge. All right. So any questions, anyone? All right, I'm going to do a roll call off just to make sure that I have everybody. I think I do, but just in case I miss someone, I don't want you not to be included on the list. And know that to get credit for this series, you must attend all 3 of the sessions that are part of it. So we have one next month, and then we have one in November.